She was the daughter of a Las Vegas mobster, a woman who knew how secrets worked, how they were kept, and how they destroyed. On December 23, 2000, Susan Berman was found lying face down in her Los Angeles home, execution style. One bullet to the back of the head, no sign of a struggle, no forced entry, just silence, and a single haunting clue sent anonymously to the police. A note with one word: cadaver. But Susan wasn't just any victim. She had ties to the mob, a famous HBO past, and a lifelong friend who just so happened to be one of America's most notorious missing persons suspects. And years later, when the cameras were rolling, that same man forgot his mic was still on and whispered something that shocked the world. Stay with us, because this case, it's more twisted than fiction. To understand the weight of Susan Berman's murder, you first have to understand who she was and what she knew. Susan wasn't just a writer. She was Hollywood royalty, Las Vegas bloodline, and East Coast intellect, all rolled into one. Born in 1945, she was the only child of Davy Berman, a powerful figure in the Las Vegas mob, who ran the Flamingo Hotel after Bugsy Siegel's death. She grew up surrounded by men who wore suits by day and carried silencers by night, the kind of world where smiles were disguises and loyalty was currency. But Susan didn't inherit her father's silence. She became a journalist, a screenwriter, and even wrote a memoir titled Easy Street, revealing intimate details about growing up mob-adjacent. She was smart, charming, eccentric, known for wearing dramatic hats, reciting poetry, and speaking with the confidence of someone who knew things she probably shouldn't. And then there was her connection to Robert Durst, the New York real estate heir worth hundreds of millions, and the husband of Kathy Durst, who vanished without a trace in 1982. Susan and Robert had been friends for decades. Best friends. Some say she was his fiercest defender. Others say she was his shield. But in late 2000, authorities had reopened the cold case of Kathy's disappearance, and Susan was about to be questioned by the police. She never got the chance. Susan Berman had been preparing for the holidays. She had friends, plans, and a small Christmas tree in her home on Benedict Canyon Drive. But for several days, no one heard from her. She wasn't answering calls. Her usual energy, gone. It wasn't like Susan to just disappear. A few days later, a friend concerned for her safety asked police to check in. What they found behind that door was chilling. Susan Berman was lying face down on the floor, shot once in the back of the head, execution style. No forced entry, no signs of a struggle, nothing stolen. It looked personal, almost surgical. There was only one clue, a handwritten envelope, mailed anonymously to the LAPD, simply marked cadaver, addressed bizarrely to the Beverly Hills Police. Someone wanted the body to be found, but not immediately. Someone who didn't fear the police, but wanted to control the timing. To detectives, this felt like more than just a random killing. It was intentional, calculated, and most disturbing of all, Susan had let her killer in. This wasn't a burglary. It wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was someone she knew, someone she trusted. At first, the case went cold. There were no fingerprints, no forced entry, no sign of robbery, no witnesses. Just that one creepy letter. But among Susan's friends, a name kept floating to the surface. Robert Durst, a man with deep pockets, deep secrets, and a trail of missing people in his past. Robert wasn't just some wealthy recluse. He was the son of Seymour Durst, one of New York's most powerful real estate moguls. By all appearances, Robert should have lived a charmed life, but his world was far darker. Back in 1982, his young wife, Kathy Durst, vanished. No body was found, no charges filed. But many, including Kathy's family, believed Robert knew exactly what happened. And Susan? She had been his alibi. The one person who could say where Robert was the night Kathy disappeared. When police reopened the Kathy Durst case in late 2000, they planned to interview Susan Berman. She had told friends the police were coming to talk to her. She seemed nervous, even scared, but she insisted she would never turn on Robert. She'd never betray him. And then, just days before that interview, she was dead. Coincidence or cover-up? Many people didn't want to believe Robert could be capable of murder. He was strange, yes. Paranoid, eccentric, emotionally cold. But a killer? No way. Even Susan had told people, Bobby's harmless. He'd never hurt me. But the LAPD quietly began investigating him. They learned he had flown into San Francisco shortly before Susan's murder and left soon after. The timeline fit, but without hard evidence, there was no arrest. And then came something unexpected and deeply disturbing. A letter. Anonymous. Chillingly precise. And in it, a single word that would eventually expose a murderer hiding in plain sight. It arrived quietly. No return address. Just one word scrawled on the front. Cadaver. Inside was a note directing police to Susan Berman's body. No explanation. No signature. Just a brutal, emotionless message. But it wasn't just what the letter said. It was how it was written. The envelope was addressed to the Beverly Hills Police. But Beverly was spelled incorrectly with an extra E. Beverly. Detectives found the mistake odd, maybe meaningless, but they kept it on file. Fast forward to 2012. Robert Durst had somehow evaded charges for years, but his behavior grew stranger. He dressed in disguises. He moved constantly. And he even posed as a mute woman in Texas to hide his identity. And most shockingly, he killed someone else while in hiding. Morris Black, his neighbor, was shot, dismembered, and dumped in garbage bags. Durst admitted to killing Black, but claimed self-defense. He was acquitted. But the pressure was mounting. Then came a moment no one saw coming. In 2015, HBO aired The Jinx, a 6-part documentary digging into Robert Durst's past. The filmmakers had obtained letters from Robert to Susan Berman years before her murder. One of those letters, shockingly, had the exact same misspelling on the envelope. Beverly Hills. Same handwriting, same style, same rare mistake. When investigators saw the two letters side by side, the anonymous cadaver note and Robert's old letter, the implication was devastating. It wasn't just a clue, it was a signature. The kind of mistake someone makes once and never realizes they've made. Suddenly, a cold case had heat. The letter that once led police to Susan's body now pointed to her killer. And the next moment, one caught on camera, would send chills across the nation. Robert Durst had agreed to participate in The Jinx, thinking he could control the narrative, that he could outsmart the cameras, the crew, the world. But by the final episode, things spiraled. In a tense confrontation, the filmmakers showed Durst the two letters side by side, the cadaver note and the letter he had written Susan years earlier. He stared at them. He blinked. And then, quietly, he said, "They both have the same handwriting. Can't imagine." His face twitched. His voice faltered. The room fell silent. And then he asked to use the bathroom, still wearing a live microphone. He stepped inside. The door closed, and as the audio kept rolling, Robert Durst began talking to Elf, muttering, processing, and then this. "There it is, you're caught." What the hell did I do? Killed them all, of course. Those 6 words sent shockwaves across the country. Was it a confession? A sarcastic comment? A slip of the tongue from a man who'd lived too long with too many lies? The producers were stunned, but they knew they had something big. The audio was turned over to law enforcement. Years had passed since Susan's murder, but now, with the handwritten letter and what sounded like a whispered confession, authorities finally had what they needed. In 2015, just one day before the final episode of The Jinx aired, Robert Durst was arrested in New Orleans, charged with the murder of Susan Berman. It was a moment decades in the making. A case built not just on evidence, but on the arrogance of a man who believed he could hide forever. He was wrong. When Robert Durst was finally brought to trial for the murder of Susan Berman, it felt like justice was finally within reach. But for many, the moment was bittersweet. It had taken over 20 years. During the 2021 trial, prosecutors painted a clear picture. Susan Berman had become a liability. She knew too much about Kathy Durst's disappearance. She may have helped Robert fabricate an alibi back in 1982. And when investigators reopened that cold case and planned to question her, Robert panicked. He silenced her, permanently. The jury heard about the cadaver letter, the misspelling, the hot mic confession. Durst's own words had sealed his fate. On September 17, 2021, Robert Durst was convicted of first-degree murder. But justice, in its cruel timing, didn't linger. Just 1 month later, Robert was hospitalized. His health had declined rapidly. On January 10, 2022, he died in custody at the age of 78, never facing charges for his wife Kathy's disappearance, never truly answering for the decades of questions surrounding him. For Susan Berman's friends, it was a hollow victory. Yes, her killer had finally been named. But the woman who had once lived in the shadow of mobsters, who had outlived the violent world she was born into, had been gunned down by a man she called a friend. And for all her storytelling brilliance, Susan never got to tell the final story, her own. Susan Berman lived her life surrounded by secrets, the kind people kill to protect. She survived the mob world of Las Vegas, became a respected writer, and stood by her friends with unwavering loyalty. But in the end, that loyalty may have cost her everything. She trusted Robert Durst, defended him, and when the past came knocking, she became a threat he couldn't afford to leave standing. What makes this case truly haunting isn't just that Susan was murdered, it's that she may have seen it coming. Her final days were quiet, anxious. She told friends the police were reaching out. She was scared. But still, she opened that door, and she never walked out again. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think Susan knew she was in danger? Would you have trusted Robert Durst or suspected him sooner? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Every theory counts. Every voice matters. Because sometimes, justice begins with someone brave enough to ask the right question. She was born on March 21st, 1992. Her name was baby Theresa, and just 9 days later, she died in her mother's arms, not because of illness, but because the law said she had to wait to die. Theresa had no brain, no consciousness, no future, but her tiny body held something extraordinary, healthy organs that could have saved the lives of other infants in intensive care. Her parents made a heartbreaking decision. They wanted her short life to mean something. But the law said no. Doctors couldn't act, and by the time baby Theresa passed, it was too late. What happened in Florida that week sparked one of the most painful ethical debates in modern medical history. And the question still haunts us today. When does life begin, and who gets to decide when it ends? Theresa Ann Campo Pearson was born in Florida on March 21st, 1992. But from the very beginning, something was terribly wrong. She was diagnosed with anencephaly, a rare and fatal birth defect. Babies with this condition are born missing parts of the brain and skull. Most die within hours or days. They may breathe and their hearts may beat, but they lack consciousness, sensation, and awareness. Theresa had no cerebral cortex, the region responsible for thought, feeling, memory, even pain. Her parents, Justin Pearson and Mary Jane Campo, were devastated. But instead of just grieving, they tried to act. They knew their daughter wouldn't survive, but they also knew her organs, her heart, kidneys, liver, could save other dying infants. So they made a brave, controversial request. Use baby Theresa's organs before it's too late. Let her life save others. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a cry for purpose. But almost immediately, the hospital refused. Not because of medicine, but because of the law. Theresa was technically alive. Her heart still beat, and that meant, under Florida state law, doctors couldn't remove her organs, even as time ran out. For 9 days, Theresa remained on life support. Her parents watched every breath, knowing each minute mattered, not just for her, but for the children who might be saved. When the moment finally came, it was too late. Her organs had deteriorated. No one could be saved. And that single moment of hesitation ignited a national firestorm. Imagine this. Your newborn has no brain. She will never wake up, never cry, never feel your touch, yet doctors say she's alive. Now imagine being told her healthy organs could save up to 7 other dying babies, but only if removed before her body shuts down. That was the nightmare Theresa's parents faced, and they made their choice. Let her go, they said. Let her life mean something. Let her death save someone else's child. They weren't asking for euthanasia, just organ donation before death. But Florida law said no. In Florida, organs can only be removed after someone is legally declared dead, either by cardiac death, when the heart permanently stops, or brain death, when all brain activity ceases. Theresa met neither definition. Her heart still beat, and while she had no cerebrum or cerebellum, her brainstem still functioned, enough to regulate breathing and heartbeat. That sliver of brain activity meant she was legally alive, even if she'd never be conscious. Doctors' hands were tied. Removing her organs would have been legally considered homicide. That single distinction between a life lived and a body that merely functions became the center of a painful national debate. Supporters of the parents argued that laws must evolve with science. If Theresa would never think or feel, was it right to preserve her biological life at the cost of others? Opponents feared the slippery slope. If doctors removed organs before legal death, where would the line be drawn? What about coma patients, people with disabilities? Would their lives be next? In a world of rapid medical progress, the law stood still. And as baby Theresa's condition deteriorated, so did the hope of donation. "She's dying," her mother said. "We know that. We just want something good to come out of it." But good never came. Only heartbreak and an empty crib where a legacy could have been born. As the story spread, Florida and then the entire country erupted in debate. Radio hosts gave their takes. Newspaper headlines screamed, "Mercy or murder? Whose life matters most?" On one side, bioethicists, doctors, grieving parents, calling for a new definition of death in cases like Theresa's. They saw courage in the parents' request, a desire to turn tragedy into hope. On the other, legal conservatives, religious leaders, disability advocates, warning that allowing organ donation before death would set a dangerous precedent. Baby Theresa's case wasn't just about medicine. It was about morality. It was about law. And most of all, it was about the question no one can answer easily. What does it really mean to be alive? If you start harvesting organs from living children, one pastor warned, you start playing God. TV networks lit up with heated debates. Philosophers and pediatricians clashed on primetime panels. Some compared it to the Terry Schiavo case, another ethical firestorm that would erupt nearly a decade later. Even the American Medical Association weighed in, stating that while the law must be respected, baby Theresa's case was one of the most compelling arguments yet for reform. For Theresa's parents, the media frenzy was both a comfort and a curse. They had hoped their daughter's short life might save others. Instead, they were thrust into the center of a national moral battle, judged by strangers, politicized by pundits, and trapped in a system unwilling to bend. "We didn't ask for this spotlight," her father said quietly. "We just wanted to do what was right." But baby Theresa had become more than a child. She had become a symbol of ethics, of law, of life, and everything in between. Baby Theresa lived exactly 9 days. 90 days. 9 days where her parents sat silently by her side, watching her tiny chest rise and fall. No crying, no blinking, no recognition. Just silence and a faint, fragile heartbeat. Doctors knew there would be no recovery, no surgery, no medicine, no miracle. She would never gain consciousness. Her brain would never develop. But the law required time. It demanded that nature run its course. And with each passing hour, her once healthy organs began to deteriorate. The clock that could have meant life for other infants was now ticking, in reverse. On March 30th, 1992, Theresa's heart stopped. No ventilator, no heroic measures, just the quiet end of a life that had never really begun. By the time she was officially declared dead and the medical team stepped in, it was already too late. Her organs were no longer viable for transplant. All the hope was gone. Her mother, Mary Jane Campo, would later say, "We weren't asking to take her life. We were asking to give meaning to it." That moment, when Theresa passed without saving anyone, shattered them. Because they hadn't just lost their daughter, they had lost the chance for her to become something more. A lifesaver, a miracle in someone else's story. And the world watched, divided. Was it an act of compassion to want her organs donated? Or was it a line that shouldn't be crossed? One thing was certain. Baby Theresa's short life left behind more questions than answers. And for her family, the pain didn't end when her heart did. Theresa's body was quietly laid to rest. But her name, and the debates surrounding it, never truly faded. Though no laws were changed immediately, her case became a landmark in medical ethics. Across universities, from Harvard to Stanford to Johns Hopkins, her story was studied and debated by future doctors, lawyers, and philosophers. She became a case study in moral philosophy. Is it ethical to use organs from someone who is biologically alive but neurologically gone? Should the law evolve with scientific advancement or remain grounded in precedent? Her parents never stopped speaking out. They gave interviews, they attended medical conferences, they wrote letters to lawmakers, and their message remained heartbreakingly simple. Let other families make the choice we were denied. Over time, some states began revisiting how they defined brain death. The medical community began exploring expanded donation protocols, including a process called donation after cardiac death, DCD, where organs can be removed after the heart stops, even if brain death isn't formally declared. Theresa's organs were never used, but her story shaped a generation of bioethicists and gave strength to families facing similar heartbreak. She became a symbol, not of death, but of unrealized potential. And though her parents never got to witness the changes they hoped for, they did something most people never find the strength to do. They turned grief into purpose. Baby Theresa didn't save 7 children, but her name still echoes in the rooms where decisions about life and death are made. Every single day. And that legacy, it just might be more powerful than any transplant ever could have been. What happened to baby Theresa wasn't just a tragedy. It was a test of law versus ethics, science versus emotion, and, perhaps most painfully, logic versus love. Her parents asked a question we still struggle to answer. If a child is alive in body but gone in mind, does the law serve her or stand in her way? Their request wasn't about death, it was about meaning. And in the end, that meaning was denied. But now it's your turn to weigh in. What would you have done in their place? Should organ donation have been allowed while Theresa was still technically alive? Or was the law right to hold that line? Let us know in the comments, respectfully, because these aren't just policy decisions, they're deeply human ones. Baby Theresa never got the chance to speak, but maybe, through conversations like this, her story still can.